So welcome everybody to another episode of Software Architecture Stream. This time around from OP conference, and we are starting, OP actually started today, and we are starting OP conference this evening with the English evening. Tomorrow we'll have a few shorts during the lunch break, and then we will have the climate panel and the diversity panel on Wednesday and Thursday, all of them in German, I'm afraid. So this is the only English part of the program. And first session will be about facilitating the collaborative design decisions. So that's what we're going to talk about here. Then my colleague Lisa will talk with Rick Marcelis about testing and quality. And then I will talk with Scott Embler about data technical depth. So that's what we are going to do today. And a warm welcome to Gien, Evelyn, and Kenny. They are going to do a tutorial on Friday for facilitating collaborative design decisions. That's what we are going to talk about today too. So do you want to say a few words about yourself? Who wants to start? Gien, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Gien. I'm from Belgium. I am a software consultant that specializes in F# and making a decision theory. Sorry, I was distracted by my cat. I was doing weird things here. So I specialize in decision theory as well. That's basically something that's more known in the economics, and I try to read things about it and then see how we can apply it to software. Kenny, why don't you tell a bit about
Yeah, my name is Kenny Baas-Schwegler. Schwegler, depending from where you come from, I always say Schwegler in Dutch. Sorry for that. No, I'm a background in electrical engineering, rolled into software development, and then caught off to domain-driven design. And now my current focus is mostly the parts of visual collaboration and strategic design, while you need technical design as well. But I focus mostly on that, thanks to my wife, background as social scientist, and thanks to working, of course, with Evelyn, after you.
Oh, nice bridge. Okay, I'm trying to not get distracted by the cat as well. So I'm Evelyn, also a strategic software delivery consultant and a behavioral change consultant. And as Kenny mentioned, I have a background in social sciences as well, so cognitive psychology, to be more specific. And I'm a strong believer in these so-called socio-technical systems, where we really need to balance the socio-technical and cognitive aspects. So what I do on a daily basis, I help teams and leadership teams specifically to steer on the social and behavioral consequences that are implied by technical choices and the other way around. And I do that by using a number of techniques and tools and practices and methods, including domain-driven design. And that's in a nutshell, I think, what I do. Yeah.
Interesting. So quite a few different perspectives in the session today. So that's great. Well, first of all, why would I do any design decisions collaboratively? I mean, obviously, an alternative would be to get the most senior, most experienced person in the team to make the decision. And obviously, that's going to be a sound decision and a great decision. So why would you collaborate on it?
Yeah. So shall I take this one?
Sure.
Yeah, the simple answer is better thinking, better buy-in, and better decision all around. But also, if you're losing valuable knowledge, so usually the person with the most knowledge has also the curse of knowledge. So they probably don't know what they don't know, and new people who coming in who are maybe more junior. I was for once that person. Might A, have knowledge you don't know, but B, also needs to learn. So it's better to do it collaboratively together. And going into that, the better buy-in, right? The sustainability of a decision is once people don't feel heard in their view, they probably turn into resistant behavior, like that cat is doing now. Cat wants attention, not feeling heard. So and everyone can understand or feel like if they make a decision, all of a sudden people won't do what's been decided, right? Or they're gonna stall, or they're gonna make jokes, sarcastic jokes, or gossip or, well, they're just not on board with the decision. That's why we call it sustainable decision making, right? So a decision can be made by the technical leader, which sometimes is a good thing, but how do we get the rest on board with and buy in our decision? Which is much easier in a collaborative way because everyone could put their knowledge and models out, right? So
and you especially also want, I mean, like you were saying, you could just have the most senior or most knowledgeable people in the room, but you do want that knowledge from others as well, because you have this risk that if you only invite the most knowledgeable people, you miss a lot of knowledge and a lot of insights and perspectives. And especially because, well, the more seniority you have, also the higher that you are getting in rank, and then you might becoming way more intimidating for other people to actually speak up. But these people might have actually very valuable and interesting things to say. So that's why we always aim to get like all the domain experts, and that includes juniors, seniors, and everything in between, in order to actually get to the most complete view and perspective and model possible.
Yeah. And there's one other dimension there, right? It has to be on the same scope of architecture. So if you're on different scopes of architecture, you don't need to invite everyone, right? But if you're on the same scope, if you don't include everyone, you won't have a mutual understanding usually, because people will take assumptions, right? If the most knowledgeable person says, this is what we're going to do, you're assuming that the other person is knowledgeable enough to understand your decision and thus act accordingly to your decision, which is, well, by default, never the case, in my opinion. So it's also sharing knowledge between each other, right? Which, well, if you ever been on a situation where you're new, you're usually getting the most easy ticket, right, to do. But that's actually, it's a system trap where the people with the most knowledge always get more knowledge and even more knowledge and knowledge and knowledge, while the people who are just in will get small knowledge. So they're always behind. So it's better to collaborate on it so that everyone is onboarded quickly and you don't get that, oh, I cannot go on holiday because I hold all the knowledge problem, or the bus factor, or the lottery factor, whatever you want to call it.
So that's quite interesting, quite a lot of stuff. So what you're saying is there are better decisions, there's better buy-in, and it's also about the roles. One thing that I'm wondering is who should collaborate on the design decisions? So I think Evelyn just said that also domain experts should collaborate on it. So probably engineers, software architects, domain experts, but a lot of architectural decisions are still technical. So why would a business expert be involved on that? So does it depend on the decision who should be involved, or are there any general rules? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, it of course always depends on obviously we're consultants. It always depends on what you want to achieve and what you want to solve. But we feel it's especially important to mix up these, well, business and IT. I'm against those terms, but I get what you're saying, because, well, like we said, every technical choice has a social implication, right? So every technical choice that you're making has an effect on how your organization is organized, or how your teams are structured, or what behavioral changes that implies, which decisions are going to be made, and that also affects the business. So if you are in a room together doing the collaborative modeling, then you can already work with those perspectives, and then you can already account for these factors that will heavily influence each other. You've heard about Conway's law. Well, that's why you want all the domain experts in a room. So that's one take of it. But my colleagues definitely have other stuff to say about that.
Yeah, it depends on scoping of the architecture. Ruud Malan has and Dana Bredemeyer has this nice scoping, and that relates to also Elliot Jacques in my levels of work. So it depends on what scope of architecture you're including, but let's just take it on a team perspective, right? So of course, if you talk about should we go with what database solution, you generally don't involve the domain expert, but you want to at least beforehand talk to them and know what's their real problem before I know which database solution is the best from things that software engineers don't care about from a money perspective, first of all, right? Which one is more expensive, which one is cheaper. And so you really need to understand, and that comes from domain-driven design, right? The real problem of your domain experts. And of course, there's a period At some point you can say, well, maybe we probably know enough for now. Let's decide on the technical decision together. But of course, there's new feedback, new questions that has a business impact again. So you need to go in return. It's never linear. It's always whirlpooling around. So yeah, you really need to be mindful of when to include and when not. But what you want is to have that shared responsibility together with your stakeholders or your domain experts in your team, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh, this is about database technology, I don't care, do your thing mode, because then it goes wrong, because at some point developers will just find technical complexity to solve instead of domain complexity. And then you have over-engineering.
Okay, cool. Gien, anything to add from your side, or?
So I was thinking about this while Kenny was talking. Like one of the things that some industries do, if you go more general and not necessarily go about design decisions, but sort of trying to solve a specific problem, is that they sort of outsource it because they're stuck in their way of thinking and they don't see a solution forward. So they sort of outsource it. They put it online somewhere, and then everyone can sort of have a look at it. And often the solutions then come in or from people who are, nowhere in that industry. So basically what you're doing is trying to sort of recreate that solution as well. You involve people that do not have, the software development knowledge, because they look at problems. And design is a problem you're trying to solve, and they just look differently at it, and they might bring up ideas or thoughts that just would not cross our minds because we are stuck in a certain way of thinking, because we are software developers, because we are architects. So I think that's why it's interesting to involve the right people, or more than just people with a technical background.
Yeah. Like, and to add to that, because you make a great point there, and this is exactly how you can counter some of the biases that we're all in. We're all stuck in what we know, what we used to do. The people who are always speaking up with the ideas and who always make the decisions. But you kind of want those. I want to say naive, but it's not. But the perspectives on stuff and the challenging way of looking at things, like, hey, you've been in this for weeks, months, or maybe even years. You want those perspectives of people that have never seen it and say, well, this is weird, or why did you do this? Why did you make this decision? And that really helps in challenging all of the biases that are flying around in these sessions.
Yeah, and maybe a concrete example, like technology choices, like maybe Vue versus React, right? That can be, if you let engineers go, they will just rationally check which one is best and which one I'm more comfortable with. But you also have a strategic approach that maybe if you need to scale, or maybe that's not between those two, but a like quirky framework, and you want to scale to 200, new developers, then maybe that Svelte.js, which is probably a very nice and very good tool, I don't know, is the best choice. But on a technical perspective, but not from a scaling perspective towards 200 people recruiting, because that's a recruitment problem, right? So then Svelte might not, or some other very good framework that are out there might not be your choice of technology at this moment. So.
One thing that I'm wondering, I mean, we are talking about how you get buy-in and how you need to include a lot of people in any decision. To me, that sounds like decisions will take forever then. So what do you do about it? How do you feel about that? Is that a problem? How do you deal with it if it's really a problem? So what's your take on that?
I can start.
Go ahead.
But I'm very curious what are the decision theoretical person has to say about that as well. So it now sounds like involving in the decision, and then the image that comes to mind is we're all going to sit around at a table and we're going to discuss the decision that needs to be made, and we're not getting out of the room until we decide something. But involving people in a decision also means like involving them in the whole modeling process, right? So not just in the eventual decision making part, as in we're sitting around a table and we are doing something, but at least making sure that everything that has to be on the table is on the table, and that all the perspectives are in there, and that we include the more weirder perspectives of people, and that we at least have involved the domain experts and the people that need to have a say in this without bypassing them in a way. So it can very well be that eventually one person is making the decision, but then at least it's a very informed decision based on all of the input perspectives and then all of the other stuff that's in there. So I think there's a nuance there in how to approach that.
Yeah, so from a decision theory perspective, like first of all, decision theory always encapsulates uncertainty. So no matter what you decide, you have to learn to live with the fact that you might not have taken the best option forward, and that there will be a sort of penalty or a cost to changing the direction or to take another option of your decision. So I think if you take uncertainty into account when you're designing something, like you only know when do you know if you picked the right architecture or when you picked the right design? I mean, you can only know that years later or when you have actually worked with that for a very long time. So learning to sit with uncertainty is something that you should do, which should sort of take away the decision paralysis a bit. And another helpful trick that I thought is a heuristic from them. And it's basically so you have all these options and you need to gain more information in it. So we have different designs in our scenario here. And then basically they ask themselves, like, if you had a fortune teller or a wizard, and you could ask them one question about all these options, like what piece of information would you ask to this fortune teller, which can tell you because they know the future. And by looking at like that, then you basically go hunt for that information. And then with that piece of information, you make the decision and you move on from it. Mm-hmm. That's sort of how they do it, to not get stuck or not to make, keep analyzing and how to move on from that.
Yeah, and to add in that way is what we usually see is if you do collaboration, well, we've done it with 30 people designing new boundaries for teams, right? And what you usually see is that at some point you get familiar opinions, but you have this divergent thinking, right? But at some point people get annoyed because you're going on, well, we're now going there and there and there, and they're like, no, let's keep to the focus of this outcome, right? But that's not how normal groups work. They're always going that way. The problem is, when do you go convergent thinking? And that's why you need a sort of, in this book, the Facilitator's Guide to Participatory, there I go again. Participatory design. They say that's the groan zone, right? That's the where it gets uncomfortable because too many ideas, and how do we go back? Now, the thing what we did with 30 people is trying to get them back with some liberating structures, right? Designing that in multiple groups. But the outcome, like Evelyn says, it's an informed decision. That outcome of the 3 ending models is taken by a group of 6, and they make the decision. And from there, you can go back to the group and say, okay, this is the decision. And if there's nothing against it, we will do this. And that's the second part that usually goes wrong, is how do we go into decision making? Does everyone have the space to say what they want? Or is it a command and you need to do this? And usually most people come in as, you have anything to say about the decision, but they already took the decision. Then just take the decision and ask, what does it take for you to go along with this decision, right? But that confusion goes wrong. How much can I buy in, or can I decide in this group?
I guess what I'm still wondering is, so let's imagine that I'm a software architect somehow responsible for, or at least that's what it says on my business card, and I'm in a project and I make a decision, like I do it by myself. Should I feel, when would that be a good option to do it by myself? Is there any such scenario, or should I generally feel guilty about making decisions by myself, not involving other people? What's your take on that?
Yeah.
You know, I'm wondering how much should I, if the answer is, well, you should basically do all the decisions with other people around, it's sort of a rule of thumb that says I should basically walk around and I should hardly ever make a decision by myself. So is that a valid rule of thumb? Is that something that you would advise?
So there's a time constraint. Yeah, there's a time constraint there, right? That's what we do, in my opinion. If there's a time constraint, you sometimes need to make that decision. But if you're unable to explain it to people why you make that decision, and you're sticking through that and you cannot explain it, then it's probably the wrong decision to make. First of all, you need to include more people. A better thing, what I would do is, if there's a time constraint, is say, look, we have a time constraint. I've picked 2 hours in this session, and we are going to make this decision. And we're not going away until we make this decision. So focusing on that we, that together. If people cannot make that decision due to all sorts of factors, right, social factors, then at the end, I still make the decision, because you know what, we have a time constraint. If we don't make this decision, business, money, or value, or business concerns are at stake, right? So you can still make the decision if it's explainable, and always ask that final question, right? This is the decision. So we're going to do this. What does it take for you to go along with this decision? Is also a very nice and valid way of doing it. But that second question never get asked, right? We're going to do this, but is there something I can do for you to make this decision more bearable? Right?
And I think that,
anything.
I mean, if you would make no decisions on your own anymore, then you will have a very hard life, I think. And I mean, it's also about what's the impact, right, of this decision? I mean, are we talking about something big and impactful for a lot of people or not? Who's affected by it? That sort of stuff. And I think my rule of thumb usually is when it comes to decision making as well, I want you, and you never know it for sure, but make informed decisions. So when you make a decision, know at least what's going on, right? Am I missing any perspectives? And make sure that you have that information when you make that decision. So asking yourself, okay, in a weird world, what am I missing here? What am I not seeing? Where are my blind spots? And then ask for that. But making a decision on your own, I would definitely do that. Yeah.
You can always add. Yeah, you can always add that. Sorry for interrupting. That's what Evelyn says. There's different stages. Like, this is the problem. Come with solutions. This is the problem, and this is what I think we should do. Then the next one is a proposition, right? This is what we're going to do. Or do you see anything that is critical of not doing it? Or the last one is the command. There's 4 stages of how you can make a decision. And the left one takes more time and the right one is instant, right? But every time you make a decision, people will start showing resistant behavior. That's a fact, actually. Yeah. So how much can you handle? How much resistant?
The other question that I'm wondering is, so I have a background I studied computer science, so I consider myself a technical person, and it seems that we have quite a diverse set of people here in the stream. So for technical people like me, what is sort of the typical mistakes that you see such people making, and what would your advice be to improve on that? Like something that is obvious once you don't have this, you don't have that technical background, but rather a background in decision theory or in social things.
So if I understand the question right, as a technical person, what should you avoid doing? That's sort of if I rephrase it. I think, like, when we're talking about designing, then a lot of the technical aspects are still can be left open and can be discussed at a different moment. So when you're really sort of designing the software, see how they fit into boundaries and all that, whether or not we should use this for a database, of whether or not we should do something sync or async, like those are all technical decisions that you can postpone. So if you are a technical person, in those moments, try not to find a solution, but really try to understand the problem that they have, how that divides into boundaries for them, like how do their processes flow, how do all those things interconnect with each other. So really focus on the business and how that connects and how that has to communicate with each other, instead of trying to already think of a solution that would fit software. So that is one of the tips I would give. I don't know, Kenny, Evelyn, if you have anything else to add.
No, I think that's what I would say as well. And I think especially, indeed, every technical choice has more social implications, right? So be aware of the implications that it has on other levels as well, and be aware of those. There's more going on. When you put more than one people in a room, group dynamics start to happen. And I think it's very valuable to at least pay attention to those and try to manage them is maybe the wrong word, but at least be aware of them, that they're going on, recognize these things. It's also what we talk about in some of our other talks and workshops. But I think that's a very valuable skill to have. You don't have to be an expert, but at least know that it's going on and see, okay, so if we are now talking about this technical stuff, what are the implications for the other world, let's say, for social aspects, cognitive aspects, behavioral aspects, what does it do? And have that conversation with the people in the room.
Yeah, I think that's, to add to that, is there, if you have an opposing view, is there a problem? And you want to agree on the problem first, and then move to a solution. So if you're saying, no, I think Kafka is the better technology. Well, first step back and see, are we actually sharing the same problem? So the why, right? Why do you want this? So if someone poses like, we need to do microservices, okay, but why do you want to? So look for the why, and it can be on a technical level as well. So that's the, and then when you're in that phase of, okay, why? Then I always ask the other, okay, who sees this different? So I make it safe to ask for the differentiator, right? So, okay, who sees it different than microservices? And then someone might say monoliths, and maybe some people are laughing, but there's always, you're never alone in that why, right? In that, why do you want that? Well, it's easier, simpler. Okay, why do you want that? Well, easy, simpler. Who else wants it? Yeah, the rest. And all of a sudden, you see that everyone wants it easier, simpler. Only the one thinks it's microservices, and the other one thinks it's a monolith. Okay, now we have a more interesting conversation, right? We both want the same, but we have different solutions. Why is that? How is that? What are the consequences, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very good advice. There is one thing on the chat. I'm not sure what to make of it. So Rudolf said, hello, is it better to make a decision at all, or the same decision will be taken for you by somebody else? You won't be happy. Not sure what to make of it. It somehow feels like an advice to rather make decisions yourself, because otherwise someone will enforce a decision on you. Any comment on that? Anything that you would say to that?
Yeah, in decision theory, there's this concept that not making a decision is making a decision. That not doing anything at all, it's an option to not do anything at all. It is an option for, to let someone else make that decision for you if you don't want it. So is that good? It depends. If like, for example, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here with that question, but if it's that you're trying to make a collaborative decision and you just cannot get out of it, then by all means take that other option and let someone else decide for you. Like, get out of the I don't know the English term, the blockage, get out of that blockage and actually pick that option by letting someone else decide. And often if you just mention that, we'll just go for that, then you can also sort of like continue to it's sort of, oh no, but we'll decide like that other option. If you say like, hey, this is an option and I'm utterly willing to take it, then you can, sort of move forward sometimes as well. I made a few assumptions here, but I hope that sort of answers your question to the person who asked it.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. Not making a decision is a decision, and sometimes not making a decision yourself is a very good idea. So I'm afraid we are at the end of the time box. Can you?
Yeah, I've added a blog post in the links later on from Rebecca that talks about least and last responsible moment for architecture decision making. That's all.
Exactly, that's a very good point. So we will have a few links on the show notes. In particular, I learned about a book today that is called "What Is Your Problem?" So that's an interesting book. At least the title sounds interesting. So we will put those links on the blog. And thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks a lot for the information and the input. And I hope you have a pleasant, great tutorial on Friday that is actually booked out, as far as I know.
It is, yeah.
It is.
Okay.
So, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Yeah, thanks.